I was thinking recently about what it actually feels like to learn a really complex video game. Like when you first pick up the controller.
Oh, right. When you have no idea what you're doing.
Exactly. You are just button mashing. I mean, you're hitting literally whatever button you can, just hoping to jump over the pit or, defeat the boss. You just want to survive the level.
It's an entirely transactional experience at that stage.
It is. But then you watch a professional play that exact same game.
Yeah.
And they aren't button mashing at all. Like zero panic. They are engaged in this intense strategic resource management.
Every single movement is deliberate.
Right. Every choice of tool is incredibly calculated. They are actually controlling the entire environment, not just, reacting to it. And I realized this is exactly what it feels like to hit a wall in language learning.
Yes, absolutely. That plateau.
Yeah, where the grammar, right? You have a decent vocabulary, you can order the coffee, you can survive the Zoom meeting, but the conversations still feel stiff. They feel kind of robotic.
Because you are essentially still button mashing.
Exactly. You're just trying to survive the human interaction. So welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Our mission today is to explore the hidden architecture of what linguists call C2 level, or highly advanced English. We are pulling from some fascinating sociolinguistic frameworks to look at how to break through that wall.
Because making that transition, moving from mere survival to actual strategy, is profound. At the highest levels of proficiency, language just fundamentally shifts its purpose.
It's not just about exchanging basic data anymore, is it?
No, not at all. It's no longer about what time the train arrives or where the PDF is saved on the server. It becomes this highly sophisticated precision tool. You use it to convey really delicate emotional nuances.
To manage messy interpersonal situations.
Precisely. And to showcase critical thinking in real time, often while under immense pressure.
You're using vocabulary and grammatical structure to actively dictate the emotional outcome of a conversation. It's about achieving fluid communication that's powered by actual emotional intelligence, not just reciting phrases from a textbook.
But I do think there's a really vital reassurance we need to establish right up front based on the analytical frameworks we're looking at today.
Oh, definitely. The fact that this isn't a sprint.
Right. Language mastery at this tier is a marathon, and it is completely defined by intense fluctuations. The progression is never just a straight line going up.
Yeah, you might have days where you feel incredibly articulate, like you are effortlessly weaving these complex thoughts together. And then literally the very next morning,
you feel like you've completely forgotten how to conjugate a basic verb.
Yes, it's so frustrating. But the sources point out that this cognitive fatigue is completely normal, right?
It is. The underlying thesis of the research is that cumulative mastery happens incrementally. Every single time you deliberately attempt to articulate a complex thought or navigate a tricky conversation using a novel structure, you are building what the frameworks call linguistic capital.
Linguistic capital, I love that term. It basically frames every difficult, awkward conversation as an investment rather than, a potential failure.
Exactly. Nothing is wasted.
Even if you stumble. Like if you try to use a really sophisticated metaphor and it just totally flops, you still gained capital from making the attempt.
You stretch the muscle.
Right. And to understand how advanced speakers build this capital, we have to start with how they orient themselves in the world. Specifically, how they describe external forces of chaos.
Because everyday stress is really the proving ground, isn't it? That's where our communication skills are tested first.
Absolutely. If you cannot accurately articulate the chaos of your environment, you can't even begin to process it, let alone manage how it's affecting you.
Which brings us to the vocabulary of cognitive overload. The frameworks we are diving into distinguish heavily between just being busy and actually losing control.
Okay, let's break that down. Like the distinction between hectic and frenetic.
Yes. A hectic schedule is busy, certainly. You might have back-to-back meetings, your calendar is completely full, but, and this is the key, the baseline equilibrium remains intact.
You're tired, but you're still managing the system.
Right. You are still the one driving the car. But when an advanced speaker chooses to use the word frenetic, they are signaling a really profound shift in their internal state.
They are communicating that the sheer volume of activity has tipped over into something wild. Something uncontrolled.
Think of a hospital emergency room right after a major accident. Or the floor of a stock exchange the very second a surprise interest rate announcement drops.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the noise, the speed, the overlapping tasks, it borders on total pandemonium.
Precisely. That is frenetic.
But wait, let me just explore the boundaries of that word for a second. Does frenetic inherently have to mean something is falling apart? Like, what if you were watching a really intense tied basketball game in the final minute?
Okay, yes.
Or you're in this incredible high-energy creative brainstorming session where ideas are just flying everywhere. Can that frenetic energy ever be a positive thing?
Well, context and domain really dictate the flavor of the word here. In artistic or purely physical realms, absolutely, you might praise a contemporary dancer's movements as brilliantly frenetic, meaning, highly expressive and boundless, defying structure.
Okay, I see.
However, in the cognitive, professional, or everyday relational context that we are focusing on today, using frenetic almost universally implies a level of cognitive overload. It implies distress.
Even if that brainstorming session was ultimately productive.
Exactly. Even if you got a great idea out of it, the actual subjective experience of being in that room was one of slipping control. It's a very exhausting state to maintain for long.
Right. It's like the feeling of running downhill just a little bit too fast. Your legs are moving. You haven't actually tripped yet, but you know you are not entirely in charge of your own momentum.
That is a perfect analogy. And when you are in that specific state, you become highly susceptible to the forces of chance.
Which brings up a really fascinating concept from our sources. Serendipity.
Yes.
Now, I feel like we often treat serendipity as just, a fancy synonym for luck. But winning the lottery is lucky. Finding a $20 bill on the sidewalk is lucky. Serendipity operates on a totally different mechanical level, doesn't it?
It does. It is defined as a fortunate collision of paths, an accidental alignment of circumstances. But crucially, serendipity inherently requires the subject to be observant or prepared or actively engaged enough to actually capitalize on the accident.
Okay, so it's not just passive luck.
No. If you are wandering through a messy flea market and you just happen to find a rare first edition of a book you've been actively researching for 10 years, that is serendipity. The overarching search was highly intentional. The discovery in that specific, dusty corner was pure chance.
The sources bring up that classic scientific example of Alexander Fleming discovering penicillin.
A prime example. He accidentally left a culture exposed to mold. Just a mistake. But the accident only became a world-changing breakthrough because he had the highly trained, observant eye to notice what the mold was actually doing to the bacteria.
Right. A less observant person would have just thrown the ruined petri dish in the trash and been annoyed. It's chance meeting preparedness. And often, that chance happens when we are pushed completely out of our normal routines by external pressure, which leads us to the feeling of being inundated.
I think inundated is one of the most evocative words in the English language.
I love the physical imagery of it. It's not just a flat metric of volume. It's a full sensory experience. You are overwhelmed to the point of feeling physically submerged.
You are drowning in the sheer mass of whatever it is. It is a highly visceral verb. It paints this picture of a flood sweeping over the banks of a river.
Right. You aren't just like receiving a lot of emails. You are inundated with 500 unread messages after a 2-week vacation.
The input has wildly exceeded your processing capacity. But, and this is vital to note, the input itself doesn't actually have to be negative.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think of an independent musician. They could be inundated with collaboration requests and major label offers after a song goes viral overnight on social media.
Oh, I see. The opportunities are amazing, but the sheer volume is still crushing.
Exactly. The core of the word conveys the intensity of the volume. The physiological and psychological pressure of managing that much input still creates this paralyzing weight.
Okay, so let's put these 3 concepts.
Yeah.
Frenetic, serendipity, and inundated into a practical architecture. The frameworks give us this really compelling case study to examine, featuring a woman named Jennifer.
Let's look at Jennifer.
We get this narrative recounted through a dialogue between 2 of her coworkers. And Jennifer has been desperately hunting for an apartment in a notoriously unforgiving, hyper-competitive housing market.
Now, notice how the advanced speakers in this dialogue construct the narrative stakes. They do not merely state the transactional facts. They don't just say, Jennifer needed a place to live and it was hard.
Right, that would be the button-mashing version.
Exactly. Instead, they actively build a psychological foundation for the listener. They describe her as deeply despondent. Her morale has been completely inundated by the sheer volume of rejections she has faced from landlords.
They're setting a really dark baseline of emotional exhaustion.
They are. So Jennifer is having an incredibly frenetic week at work. The deadlines are piling up, the chaos is peaking, and because she is so cognitively overloaded, she makes a tiny mistake.
A microscopic deviation. She breaks her tightly controlled morning routine, and she forgets to pack her lunch.
A deviation caused entirely by the external chaos we just defined.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So forced out of her routine, she goes down to this crowded, noisy local cafe. She is sitting there, utterly stressed out, complaining loudly on her phone to her mother about this miserable apartment hunt. And here is where the serendipity strikes.
The collision of paths.
Yes. A stranger at the very next table, a woman named Lisa, overhears her venting. Lisa leans over, interrupts the phone call, and says, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. Are you looking for a one-bedroom?"
And the alignment of circumstances just locks perfectly into place. It turns out Lisa is suddenly moving abroad at the very end of the month. She urgently needs a reliable person to take over her lease.
And it's not just any lease. It's an apartment that happens to be 2 blocks from Jennifer's office. It has a balcony, and it perfectly matches her strict budget.
It is the ultimate fortunate collision.
But here is where we see the actual transition from fluency to mastery in the source material. The coworkers who are recounting this story to each other don't just say, "Wow, what a crazy coincidence for Jennifer."
No, they don't. They use advanced conversational mechanics to extract the deeper philosophical meaning from the event.
They use narrative arcs. They use deliberate pacing to make the payoff hit the listener so much harder.
That is the essence of linguistic architecture. Advanced communicators shape raw, chaotic information into a structured narrative experience. The contrast is what provides the emotional resonance.
Right, you have to fully establish the absolute agony of Jennifer's inundated, frenetic reality first. Because if you don't build up that dark, stressful setup, the bright payoff of getting the apartment just feels, well, unearned. It feels hollow to the listener.
And the grammatical choices they use to tell this story are truly fascinating. There's a specific structure the first speaker uses that completely changes the tone of the room.
Oh, the conditional thing. Yes. Instead of saying the standard, totally expected phrase like, if she hadn't forgotten her lunch, she wouldn't have met Lisa.
Which is perfectly correct grammar, by the way.
Right, it's correct. But instead, the speaker says, had she not forgotten her lunch, she never would have met Lisa. To me, that sounds almost literary. It sounds like a magic spell. It instantly elevates the entire conversation. It commands attention.
You are identifying the incredible power of an inverted conditional. Had she not, were I to, should you need. At an intermediate level, a student learns standard if-then conditionals purely as a mechanical rule of syntax, just something to memorize to pass a grammar test.
Just hitting the right buttons.
Exactly. But at a C2 level, you deploy inverted conditionals as deliberate stylistic choices to add rhetorical punch and gravitas. It literally forces the listener to lean in because it breaks the expected conversational rhythm.
It just sounds inherently more elegant.
It does. But more importantly, it signals to everyone in the room that the speaker has a complete internalized command of the language's underlying mechanics. They aren't just following the rules, they are playing with them.
It's the pro gamer executing a flawless, complex combo that is perfectly timed to the situation. But what really stands out to me is the other coworker in this dialogue. The person listening to the story.
Yes, the active listener.
They don't just sit there silently nodding. They are actively participating, but they're doing it using advanced discourse markers. Instead of just grunting, or saying, oh, that's crazy, they respond with, so the high-pressure environment actually catalyzed the breakthrough.
That is a phenomenal demonstration of high-level active listening. The second speaker is synthesizing the raw narrative data in real time. They are validating the first speaker's core theme and collaboratively searching for the deeper meaning.
It's not just a passive wow.
No. By choosing the phrase catalyze the breakthrough, they are explicitly confirming the complex cause and effect relationship between the frenetic stress and the serendipity. It completely elevates the interaction. It moves it from a simple monologue where one person talks and the other just waits for their turn into a shared philosophical exploration of how the world actually works.
This is such a crucial takeaway for you listening. When you are recounting a crazy week or a really stressful event to a friend, don't just dump a list of complaints onto the table. Build the architecture,
Shape the narrative.
Exactly. Use precise vocabulary to set the emotional stakes. Deploy grammatical structures that demand attention, and actively invite the person you are talking to into a collaborative search for meaning.
And that mastery over the external narrative seamlessly prepares us for a much, much more difficult challenge.
Boy, the internal stuff.
Yes. Because once you can articulate the chaotic forces of the external world, the true test of your linguistic architecture requires turning inward. We have to examine the vocabulary of internal friction.
We are moving from the macro environment to the micro environment. How we navigate personal boundaries, hidden shame, and taboo topics without causing irreparable damage to a relationship.
This is where the stakes get intensely personal.
The delicate dance of relational nuance. So let's look at the foundational concepts the frameworks provide to help us navigate this internal friction. The first is understanding the word subtle.
A very powerful word.
Right. And subtle doesn't just mean small. It means delicate, precise nuances that require significant emotional discernment to even perceive in the first place. It's the absolute opposite of the obvious, the loud, or the explicit.
It implies an entire reality that exists just below the surface of normal, everyday perception.
Like a slight shift in someone's demeanor.
Exactly. A slight, almost imperceptible tightening of the jaw. A fraction of a second hesitation before answering a simple question. Or a tendency to look away when a specific topic is breached. These are the nonverbal and microverbal cues that emotionally intelligent communicators are constantly, quietly scanning for.
They are the early warning systems of relational distress.
Precisely.
And what those subtle cues usually point to is our next concept, being reluctant. Now, I really want to clarify this one because reluctance is complex. It isn't just a polite way of saying no.
Not at all.
Reluctance implies deep internal friction. It is a hesitation, a dragging of the feet, or this pervasive doubt that is very often driven by fear or anxiety or a sense of inadequacy, rather than outright opposition to an idea.
That is a vital distinction to make. If you ask a colleague to take on a new project and they flatly tell you they hate the idea and refuse to do it, they are opposed. That is clear. You know where you stand.
Right. But what if they agree to do it?
If they say yes, yet they constantly miss minor deadlines, they offer vague excuses about their bandwidth, or they suddenly start avoiding meetings about the project, they are reluctant. It perfectly describes the psychology of avoidance. The person is disinclined to participate, usually for internal reasons that they feel they cannot safely or comfortably articulate to you.
So they just suffer in silence, hoping the problem magically goes away.
Which it never does.
Never. And the antidote to that toxic reluctance is our third concept. Being assertive. Now, this is a word that carries so much cultural baggage. Assertive is constantly and dangerously confused with aggressive.
Yes, that's a very common misinterpretation. Being aggressive is entering a conversation to win, to dominate, or to ignore the other person's rights and feelings entirely.
It's a zero-sum game.
Exactly. But being assertive is an entirely different psychological posture. It is the highly calibrated balance of expressing your own needs, your boundaries, and your reality with absolute clarity and confidence, but doing so respectfully.
It means you're refusing to passively submit to a situation you resent, but you are also refusing to hostilely demand your own way.
You advocate for your own internal reality while actively maintaining respect for the shared relational space between you and the other person.
To see just how incredibly hard this balance is to strike, let's look at a case study from the materials that honestly made me cringe because of how universally relatable it is.
Yes, the expensive birthday dinner.
The expensive birthday dinner. Okay, so we have two very close friends, Jake and Emma. Emma has an upcoming milestone birthday, and she has assertively taken charge of the plans. She picked a table for a group at a notoriously expensive, highly formal restaurant. Let's call it Le Bernardin.
On the surface, this is a standard social interaction, a friend organizing a celebration. But beneath the surface, there is profound, silent turbulence.
Huge turbulence. Because Jake is secretly under immense financial strain. We learned from the case study that he recently had to accept a significant pay cut to avoid being laid off at his company.
A massive blow to his stability.
Right. However, he has not disclosed this reality to anyone in his friend group.
Because money is the ultimate taboo. It is so deeply tied to our sense of self-worth and status in a group.
Exactly. So Jake is deeply reluctant to go to this extravagant dinner. But his reluctance is driven by a subtle yet crushing sense of shame. He's terrified that if he admits he simply can't afford a $200 meal, he will become a burden to the group. Or worse, he fears that his friends will pity him, and the fundamental dynamic of their equal friendship will be permanently altered.
So he stays silent. He is trapped. He is attempting to maintain a social facade that his current material reality literally cannot support.
He is burning massive amounts of psychological energy, just pretending everything is fine.
But the dramatic irony of this entire scenario, and this is what makes it such a brilliant case study in human communication, is that Emma is also completely reluctant about this dinner.
This is the twist that changes everything. She booked the restaurant, but she doesn't actually want to be there. She secretly felt the venue was far too staid, too stiff, and overly formal for her personality.
So why did she book it?
Because she genuinely preferred the idea of a chaotic, intimate, casual gathering at her apartment. But she assumed Jake and the rest of the group would expect a lavish, extravagant gesture for a big milestone birthday. She didn't want to let them down.
They are both trapped in a prison of their own unspoken, wildly inaccurate assumptions. They are each trying to please a phantom version of the other person that does not actually exist in reality.
It is a textbook example of how a lack of assertive communication breeds unnecessary anxiety and resentment. It's exactly like two people trying to dance an incredibly intricate, fast-paced tango.
While wearing noise-canceling headphones.
Yes. But the headphones are playing completely different genres of music. One is listening to a waltz, the other is listening to hip-hop.
Yeah.
They are stepping on each other's toes, they are exhausted, they're secretly furious at the other person for not keeping rhythm, and the dance is completely doomed to fail.
And it will keep failing until someone finally stops, takes the headphones off, and says, "Wait, what music are you actually listening to?"
That is such a perfect analogy for a relational misalignment. And the process of taking off those headphones in this scenario begins entirely with Emma's emotional intelligence.
Because long before Jake ever confesses his financial reality, Emma has been quietly gathering data. She has noticed Jake's subtle cues over the past few weeks.
Right. She notices that he's been dodging plans, making vague, kind of uncharacteristic excuses to avoid group travel. And he's seeming generally withdrawn from the group chat.
Now, a less perceptive or perhaps more self-centered friend might have misconstrued those subtle cues as Jake being flaky or selfish or simply losing interest in the friendship. They would have taken it personally.
They would have gotten mad.
Exactly. But Emma registered them accurately as distress signals. She recognized that his behavior was a symptom of internal friction, not malice.
So when the tension finally breaks and Jake summons the agonizing courage to call her and confess his pay cut and the deep shame he's been harboring, Emma's response is the absolute epitome of C2 level relational management.
This is the turning point. Let's look deeply at what she doesn't do here. Because a lower level, maybe B1 or B2 proficiency response, might focus entirely on the logistical nightmare Jake just created for her.
Oh, right. It would sound something like, "Oh, no, really? Wow. Well, I already put down a huge non-refundable deposit on my credit card for that table. You really should have told me this weeks ago. How are we going to fix this now?"
That lower-level response is devastating. It immediately centers the logistical inconvenience over Jake's emotional vulnerability. By saying, "You should have told me," it subtly punishes him for finally being honest. It completely validates his worst fears about being a burden.
It immediately triggers his amygdala, forcing him into a defensive, highly stressed posture.
But Emma doesn't do that. She utilizes validating cues. She leans entirely into mutual accommodation. Her actual response is essentially, "I sensed a subtle shift in your energy recently, and I am so deeply glad you trust me enough to share this reality with me."
It's like verbal judo. She takes the massive, crushing weight of his shame and just sets it gently on the floor.
And then she reveals her own reluctance about the formal restaurant, which instantly levels the playing field.
He is no longer the broken friend ruining the plan. They are now co-conspirators escaping a plan neither of them liked. They immediately pivot from this awful, anxiety-inducing situation to a collaborative alternative, a rowdy, home-cooked dinner at Emma's place.
The financial pressure is instantly vaporized for Jake, and Emma gets the intimate, comfortable atmosphere she actually craved all along.
The resolution is flawless. But we have to highlight the massive internal energy drain that preceded it. The cost of avoidance is staggering here.
Jake was burning immense psychological fuel for weeks trying to pretend his reality hadn't changed. When you operate in a constant state of reluctance without ever utilizing assertiveness, you slowly erode your own well-being. You are fighting a war inside your own head.
So, how do we prevent the war? How do you, listening to this, use these linguistic tools before the crisis reaches a boiling point? Let's workshop this. Let's actually model the precise assertive response Jake should have used the very first moment Emma texted the group chat suggesting Le Bernardin.
To construct a C2 level assertive response in a sensitive situation like this, the framework suggests you must follow a specific three-part architecture.
Okay, lay it out for us.
First, you must validate the other person's positive intent, ensuring they do not feel rejected. Second, you must state your boundary clearly, neutrally, and without over-explaining or aggressively apologizing for your reality.
Because over-apologizing invites pity.
Exactly. And third, you must immediately propose a collaborative alternative that meets the underlying goal, which in this case is celebrating Emma's milestone.
Okay, let me try to draft this on the fly. It sounds like this. Emma, it is so incredibly thoughtful of you to organize something so special for your birthday. I need to be upfront with you, though. My financial situation has shifted recently, so Le Bernardin is outside my working budget right now. But I want to celebrate you properly, so could we look at some more budget-conscious alternatives? Or perhaps I could host a dinner party for you at my place.
Masterful. Let's dissect why that works so well. It respects Emma's milestone by acknowledging the importance of the event. It firmly protects Jake's financial boundary by stating the reality without groveling or oversharing the granular details of his pay cut.
Right. He doesn't have to show her his bank statements.
Exactly. And by immediately offering a solution hosting the dinner, it centers their connection. It transforms what could have been a source of deep, paralyzing shame into a routine logistical adjustment between two equals.
That is the immense power of linguistic capital. It buys you peace of mind. But setting a firm boundary for a Friday night dinner reservation is one thing. What happens when the stakes aren't just a single night out, but your entire life trajectory?
We are moving into the realm of high-stakes personal crossroads.
Right. We need to move from managing social friction to navigating a full-blown existential crisis, where every single word has to carry immense philosophical weight, and honestly, one wrong sentence can end a partnership.
When you are contemplating dismantling the fundamental structures of the life you have built, transactional language is entirely insufficient. You cannot manage an existential crisis with the vocabulary you use to order a coffee.
You need precise vocabulary that can anchor massive, terrifying, abstract concepts into a manageable reality. And the framework provides three powerful conceptual anchors for this.
The first is epiphany.
Right. We hear this word casually a lot, like, I had an epiphany about how to organize my closet.
Yeah.
But an epiphany is not just a good idea you have in the shower.
No, it is far more profound. An epiphany is a sudden, transformative recalibration of your internal compass. A fleeting moment of clarity might make you decide to take a week off work because you were tired. An epiphany compels radical, often irreversible action.
It is the sudden, undeniable realization that your current path is fundamentally incompatible with your truest self.
Yeah.
You cannot unsee it once you've seen it.
Which is terrifying. It upends everything. And because it's so terrifying, it immediately requires our second concept, being pragmatic.
This is the realist anchor. Pragmatism is dealing in practical, sensible, boots-on-the-ground solutions, rather than living in the intoxicating but dangerous clouds of ideals and theories.
Pragmatism is the gravity that keeps the epiphany from floating away into pure fantasy and self-destruction.
And the reason pragmatism is so fiercely necessary in these moments is defined by our third concept, the precarious.
Precarious means unstable, fragile, and entirely dependent on chance or changing circumstances.
It's the feeling of walking a tightrope without a safety net. So let's look at the scenario that brings these three massive concepts together. We have a highly successful corporate lawyer named Liam and his long-term partner, Chloe.
Liam has hit an absolute wall. He looks at his massive income, his prestigious partner track status, his corner office, and he views it all as a golden cage.
Golden cage, a very potent, heavily loaded metaphor. He's experiencing a profound crisis of conscience. So he approaches Chloe late one night, carrying the full, crushing weight of a genuine epiphany.
He has realized that his lucrative career is fundamentally misaligned with his actual purpose in life. He feels an overwhelming sense of hollowness, and he announces that he wants to leave the legal profession entirely to pursue painting.
Just drop everything and paint. Now, I want to pause and just think about the sheer cognitive load Liam just dumped on Chloe in this exact moment. Liam is throwing massive, abstract concepts at her. Hollowness, ultimate purpose, golden cages, souls dying.
You cannot put hollowness into an Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly. You cannot pay a mortgage with purpose. But by using this highly loaded abstract language, Liam forces Chloe to engage with him at a very high intellectual and emotional level. He isn't just saying, I'm a little bored with my current accounts at work. He's declaring, my soul is dying and I have to escape.
Precisely. The language he chooses dictates the arena in which they must fight this out. If he had used less sophisticated, lower-stakes language, she could have easily dismissed it with a superficial, transactional solution. She could have said, just take a vacation to Mexico, you'll feel better when you get back.
But his deliberate linguistic architecture demands a structural, existential response. Now, Chloe's role in this dynamic is absolutely vital. To save him and to save them, the framework suggests she must become what we can term the constructive antagonist.
The very crucial role.
Let me push back on this heavily, though, because this is where a lot of people would struggle. Constructive antagonist. Isn't she just being a dream crusher here? I mean, imagine being Liam. You finally bare your soul, you admit you are miserable, and your partner immediately throws a spreadsheet and a reality check at you.
It sounds harsh.
Shouldn't a supportive, loving partner just say, follow your bliss, I believe in you, we'll figure it out?
It sounds romantic, but in reality, that would be a deeply irresponsible reaction, and frankly, a profound failure of pragmatic love. Passive agreement in the face of a radical, impulsive life change is disastrous.
Because Liam isn't thinking clearly.
Liam is intoxicated by his epiphany. Chloe must provide a necessary stress test for that epiphany. Her initial pragmatic resistance is the friction required to ensure they actually survive the transition. If she just nods and smiles while he burns down his career, they both suffer the fallout.
Ah, I see. She grounds the abstract despair in concrete reality. She has to be the one to point out that if he marches in and leaves the firm tomorrow morning, their ability to pay their mortgage, maintain their health care, and keep their stability instantly becomes precarious.
They would be free from the golden cage, yes, but they might also be homeless in 6 months.
Exactly. She is holding the excruciating tension between his profound emotional truth and their unforgiving material reality. And this is where we witness master-level outcome management through conversation.
Watch how Chloe handles this. She does not simply shut him down. She doesn't call him crazy.
No, she listens intently. She allows the undeniable strength of his epiphany to affect her. And once she truly validates the depth of his crisis, when she accepts the premise that staying in the law long-term will destroy him, watch how she pivots her linguistic strategy.
It's incredible. She stops opposing the why he needs to leave. She accepts the epiphany and she starts actively collaborating on the how.
Yes. She beautifully transitions from being a barrier to his escape to being the chief engineer of his escape.
She realizes that an immediate dramatic resignation is far too precarious. But ignoring the epiphany and forcing him to stay is far too toxic. So she proposes a highly pragmatic middle ground.
She suggests he use his accumulated capital at the firm to ask for a 6-month sabbatical. During that specific time frame, he must commit to a strict, rigorous, almost corporate schedule of painting, studying, and portfolio building.
They agree to rigorously test the hypothesis of his new life as a working artist before they strike a match and burn the boats of his old life.
And she perfectly encapsulates this entire complex strategy in a single brilliant metaphor that changes his entire perspective.
Yeah.
She looks at him and tells him they need to focus on building a bridge instead of jumping off a cliff.
That reframing is just. It alters the entire chemistry of the room. By using that specific metaphor, she brilliantly translates his emotional panic and desire for flight into a manageable, pragmatic engineering project.
A cliff jump is an impulsive, irreversible, gravity-driven reaction to fear. You just fall. But building a bridge implies a slow, deliberate, structurally sound process that requires planning, and it inherently mitigates risk.
And crucially, it gives his highly analytical, heavily trained lawyer brain a tangible task. He can use his existing skill set planning, risk assessment, sustained effort to construct his own escape route.
This entire dialogue succeeds because Chloe is capable of holding seemingly contradictory concepts, the radical, destabilizing change of an epiphany and the cold, stabilizing force of pragmatism in the exact same conversational space without letting them destroy each other.
It's breathtaking to see a conversation broken down like that. It's literal life-saving communication.
It really is. But what happens when the bridge you've already built with someone suddenly collapses under you? We've seen how to navigate a personal crisis where there's a foundation of love. But we have to shift gears now to the workplace. When professional trust is fundamentally broken, the rules of the game change completely.
Workplace conflict is uniquely volatile. It requires a completely different architectural approach. In personal relationships, unconditional love and shared history can often smooth over clumsy communication or emotional outbursts.
You get a little more grace at home.
Exactly. In the professional realm, however, your fundamental value is intrinsically tied to your perceived competence, your reliability, and your status. When any of those are questioned, the human physiological threat response is intense. Egos are instantly bruised.
Therefore, the language used to repair professional damage must become incredibly precise. It must be almost clinical, completely devoid of excessive emotion to avoid triggering further defensiveness.
It's like performing verbal open-heart surgery. One slip of the scalpel, one poorly chosen adjective, and the patient bleeds out on the table. The career relationship is dead.
The framework provides a surgical toolkit for this exact kind of clinical de-escalation, starting with an absolute powerhouse of a verb, to misconstrue.
To misconstrue is, on a basic level, to interpret someone's words or actions incorrectly. But its utility in conflict resolution goes far beyond its dictionary definition.
It is a highly strategic tool for separating a person's intent from the actual impact of their actions. It allows you to address a mistake without accusing someone of malice.
Next in the surgical kit, we have being conciliatory. This isn't just about being nice, and it certainly isn't about offering a weak, groveling apology when you aren't actually wrong.
A conciliatory approach is a highly strategic, deliberate stance intended to gain goodwill and actively pacify hostility in the room.
It is the conscious, mature decision to prioritize the long-term restoration of the working relationship over the short-term, ego-driven desire to be proven right in the immediate argument. It deliberately lowers the emotional temperature in the room so that rational thought and problem-solving can resume.
And finally, we have discrepancy. This is such a cold, beautiful word for resolving arguments. It refers to an objective, factual inconsistency between two things.
The tactical beauty of the word discrepancy is that it completely removes the messy human element from the error.
Because when you point out a discrepancy, it is not a lie. It is not a personal betrayal. It's not a failure of character. It is simply a mathematical gap between two sets of data or two sets of expectations that needs to be logically bridged.
It completely de-weaponizes the mistake.
Let's watch these clinical tools operate in our final scenario from the sources. We have two senior colleagues, Mark and Sophie. They're working on a massive, high-stakes joint project. Mark, in a sudden moment of panic about an approaching deadline, completely bypassed their mutually agreed-upon normal review process, and he sent raw, unedited data directly to their boss.
A classic, highly triggering procedural violation. He circumvented her authority.
Right. And Sophie, completely understandably, is furious. She feels undermined and exposed to the boss. She is giving him the absolute cold shoulder, acting incredibly frosty in meetings and delaying responses to his emails.
Now, Mark realizes the environment has become toxic, and he initiates a quick 5-minute closed-door meeting to clear the air.
Notice his opening move here. He does not attack her behavior. He sets a conciliatory tone immediately. He opens by stating that he senses tension in the space between them.
That phrasing is so deliberate and careful. He doesn't say, "Why are you acting so mad at me?"
Because that would be a direct accusation that demands she defend her emotions. By saying, "I sense tension exists in the space between us," he validates the negative atmosphere, but he places the tension outside of them. It's in the room. It's not a flaw in her.
Exactly. He is objectifying the conflict. He makes the tension a third entity that they can both examine safely.
And Sophie responds beautifully by adopting that exact same clinical de-escalated tone. She doesn't call him a snake. She doesn't call him a glory hound trying to steal credit. She points out the discrepancy.
She calmly states that there was a discrepancy between their mutually agreed upon workflow and his unilateral action of emailing the boss.
It's brilliant. She isolates the specific behavior from his overall character. She attacks the action, not the man. Now, Mark has an opening. He explains his internal state, his deep anxiety about the project, looking stalled to leadership, and then he deploys that powerhouse word, misconstrue.
He says, "I ask that you please not misconstrue my panicked action as a deliberate attempt to grab credit or undermine you."
I referred to this earlier as a Jedi mind trick, which is an incredibly apt analogy, I think. Let's dissect the 4-part psychological maneuver that the word misconstrue achieves in this exact high-tension moment.
Yes. Okay, let's break down the code. Part 1, it validates her negative interpretation.
Right. By asking her not to misconstrue it, he is implicitly saying, based on the limited facts you had access to, concluding that I was undermining you was a completely logical, rational, and reasonable interpretation. He doesn't gaslight her or call her crazy for being mad.
A crucial first step. You must validate the anger before you can diffuse it. Part 2. It allows him to assert his true, benign intent. He separates the chaotic action from the assumed malice. He says, essentially, I acted badly, but I did not mean you harm.
Right. Part 3. It gently challenges her conclusion without ever attacking her judgment. He's saying the math she did was absolutely correct, but she was missing a key variable in the equation.
And finally, part 4. It creates a non-threatening open space for him to actually provide that missing context, his intense anxiety about the boss's expectations, without it sounding like he's just whining, getting defensive, or making pathetic excuses. He is simply supplying the missing variable.
It is absolute verbal magic. It completely disarms the conflict in one sentence.
Yeah.
Because he creates that safe, non-judgmental space, Sophie is able to do something incredibly mature that honestly rarely happens in corporate environments.
She owns her end of the dysfunction.
She admits that she was ruthlessly triaging her inbox because she was overwhelmed by other projects, and she completely failed to communicate to him that she had even seen his initial requests for collaboration.
This exchange perfectly illustrates the absolute hallmark of C2 maturity, the transition from accusatory you statements to explanatory I statements. The locus of control remains entirely internal for both speakers throughout the entire repair process.
When Sophie says, I saw your action through the lens of my own stress, that changes the entire dynamic. She takes total 100% responsibility for her own perceptual filters. She isn't blaming him for making her mad. She is objectively observing how her own internal state of overwhelm distorted her view of his actions.
And by doing so, they collaboratively turn what could have been a toxic, career-damaging personal vendetta into a joint, objective analysis of a system's failure.
They realized their mutual reliance on asynchronous email communication during a high-pressure deadline was the actual enemy in the room, not each other. They fixed the system instead of fighting the person.
So we have covered immense ground today.
We really have. We've looked at everything from chaotic apartment hunts driven by frenetic energy to taboo dinner parties ruined by unspoken reluctance to life-altering epiphanies requiring pragmatic bridges and finally, surgical workplace repairs using the exact right vocabulary.
The synthesis of all these frameworks points to one undeniable core thesis. True communication mastery is architectural. It is not merely descriptive.
When you wield precise vocabulary, when you deploy advanced grammatical structures like inverted conditionals, and when you engage your emotional intelligence to read subtle cues, you are not just passively reporting on the world as it happens to you.
You are strategically managing human emotions. You are actively engineering better outcomes. You're taking the raw, chaotic, frenetic materials of human interaction, and you are building bridges with them.
You stop being a passive participant who is just button mashing to survive the level, and you become an active architect of your relationships and your reality.
So we want to leave you listening with a final provocative thought to mull over.
We want you to stop button mashing today. Think of one specific area in your life right now where the communication feels stiff or broken or stalled.
Maybe it is a boundary you desperately need to set with a manager at work who keeps emailing you on weekends.
Or maybe it is a highly tricky financial truth you are avoiding discussing with a partner. Or maybe it is a social commitment you feel deeply, secretly reluctant about, but you haven't said anything.
Consider that exact specific situation. Where could being just a little bit more assertive, using clear, respectful, non-accusatory language, focusing on your internal locus of control and explanatory I statements, where could that assertiveness potentially generate an unexpected piece of serendipity for you?
Could stating your needs clearly, without shame and without assigning blame, actually unlock a positive outcome, a new collaborative solution that you hadn't even considered because you were too busy hiding and playing a role?
We invite you to use your very next difficult conversation as a practice field.
Put down the video game controller, step back from the screen, and start managing your resources. Look at the architecture of what you're saying. Build the bridge.
A fitting challenge. The tools are now in your hands.
Thanks for taking the deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.